All right, everybody, welcome to today's video. And today's topic, we're gonna go over e-body restorations and whether or not that's something you should undertake yourself. Now, before I dive into the details of today's video, if you've never done a restoration before and are thinking about an e-body Mopar as your first, I definitely recommend you check out my video that I did on whether or not a restoration project is for you. I will include a link in the description below to that video, as well as include a link at the end of this video, so you can just go ahead and click on it and it'll take you right there. But for now, let's go ahead and dive into today's topic and go into whether or not you should undertake an e-body restoration. So of course, this is going to be a high level discussion. We're not going to get into super details, the nitty gritty, but it's just to give you an overview, an idea of what to expect when restoring one of these cars. So there's never been a better time in history to undertake one of these e-body restorations. That said, it's also never been costlier than it is now. So from what I mean by the fact that it's never been a better time is now the aftermarket support is just so immense and so many parts are available, it just makes it really easy to go ahead and do one of these restorations. And the quality of the reproduction parts are just getting really good. And perfect example is like when I first started in doing e-body restorations 23 years ago with my 72 Challenger. If I wanted a set of rally gauges, a really nice set or a fully restored set, it was going to cost me $2,000 to $3,000 to get that setup for the car. Now with companies that are reproducing the gauges or companies that are making custom gauges like Dakota Digital, you can get a rally gauge set that looks brand new for under $1,500. And so in terms of that, it makes it really nice. Or in terms of like moldings, like on the 70 and 71 Cudas, the tail panel moldings, when those weren't reproduced, a set of those used would set you back $300, $400, $500, $600 or more if you wanted like a new old stock set. Now there are companies that reproduce that moldings and it looks really great, and you can buy that set for I think under $200. And so in terms of that, certain parts, it makes it a lot cheaper and easier to do these restorations. But at the same time, the initial plunge in purchasing a car has gotten really expensive. When I did my 71 Cuda restoration back almost 15 years ago, I bought that car for $5,000 and it was a relatively complete car. Nowadays, that same car would probably cost between $15,000 and $20,000, and it's nothing special other than the fact that it was a 71 Barracuda and it was a plain Jane 318 automatic car. Now granted, that one did have a lot of options like power windows and leather seats and things like that, but overall it wasn't anything super rare like a factory Cuda, whether it be a 446 pack, 383, 340, or even a Hemi car. And it was just a 318 car. And still to this day, the prices are just astronomical on 71 Barracudas. Now, of course, that's going to be the extreme of all of your e-bodies from 70 to 74 is the 71 Barracuda. And so it's just something you need to take into consideration is what type of a restoration do you want to do? What year car and model do you want? And you have to go from there. I mean, there's definitely a huge price swing from 70 and 71 model cars in general, whether it be a Challenger or a Barracuda, and 72 to 74. So are you looking to do a nut and bolt like concourse restoration on a very rare high dollar car, like a 446 pack car, a Hemi car, a TA Challenger, an AAR Cuda? Or are you looking at doing something a little more cheaper with like a 72 to 74 model? Are you not caring about numbers matching? Are you eventually going to be doing a Restomod? I mean, these are questions you need to answer before you even plunge into purchasing a vehicle, because it's going to make a big difference on how much it's going to cost you up front to purchase a car, as well as what type of parts you're going to need to have on the car when you first buy it. And so that's the next thing is when you're looking to buy your car, you need to go and try and get one that's as complete as possible, because as good as the aftermarket has gotten in the last 10, 15, 20 years, there's still certain parts that aren't available out there. And so you're gonna have to source used original parts or new old stock parts if your car is missing those. And some of those parts can get really, really expensive. I was recently, since I purchased my 74 Barracuda project that I'm gonna clone into a 71, I started looking at seeing what things were available and what's not. Now the great thing is, like, the fenders for the 71 Cudas are now reproduced, and so I can go ahead and get those from a company like AMD. Back when I did my 71 Barracuda project 15 years ago, those fenders weren't available, and so I had to source original parts. And so what ended up happening, because the cost of a Guild fender for a 71 Cuda was so expensive back 15 years ago, and we're talking like $2,000 to $3,000 for a used fender, I had to go and buy a rusted fender that was $700, cut it in half to weld it to my Barracuda fender that I had in my car, make one good fender, and then after that I had to cut out and weld in for the fender gills. And so I ended up having probably close to $1,000 tied up into this fender, not to mention all of the labor that I had, which was probably 3 weeks worth of work on this one fender. Nowadays, I can just pick up the phone, call AMD, and for like, I think $700, I can have them send me a brand new fender, and I'm ready to go. So in those terms, it's great to do the restorations now. But on the flip side, if you have a car that doesn't have the rear taillights, I've discovered 71 Barracuda taillights are running about like $800 a set. So that's something that you're going to have to take into consideration. If you buy a car at a lower price but is missing half the parts that aren't available, you're going to go ahead and just have your budget just destroyed by sourcing all of these original used parts that aren't available yet on the aftermarket. So these are definitely things you need to be taking into consideration. If you want to do a convertible, for example, as I do one of these days, I want to do a 71 Hemi Cuda convertible build like Nash Bridges' car. And I'm discovering that certain convertible parts just simply aren't available, and buying used ones is astronomically expensive. And for starters, for all 70 and 71E bodies, convertibles and Challengers, there were a total of only 10,000 cars produced. Now, how many of those cars over the years were destroyed and how many are left? Probably, if we're lucky, about half those cars are left. And a lot of those parts aren't available, like the windshield moldings. A used set of windshield moldings, I'm told it can cost upwards of $5,000. The rear seat is unique, and that can cost you over $1,000 just for the rear seat. And then some parts just aren't even available at all, like the rear quarter panel interior parts for a convertible. Those simply don't exist, and so you're going to have to either get the reproduction parts that are really an eyesore from an originality standpoint, and you can spot the difference on the grain from 20 feet away. I'm not even exaggerating on that. So you either have to be okay with that or spend thousands of dollars for original parts if you can find them. And so if you want to do an interior, if you want to do a convertible, you need to take in consideration it needs to have all of the convertible parts, and they all need to be in pretty good shape or restorable condition. Otherwise, you may not be able to even finish the restoration. And so these are definitely some starter points on things that you need to take into consideration. The good news is if you want to do like a Restomod, there's a lot of stuff out there available to support that style of build. And there are probably a dozen companies out there making upgraded suspension and brakes for them. The wheel manufacturers, of course, there are a litany of wheel choices out there to put on these cars. And if you're doing custom build on your car, you can do custom interior stuff, so you can go ahead and do things like leather wrapping the door panels, and then you don't have to worry about finding original perfect door panels for a convertible situation, for example, because you're going to cover up the condition of those panels with something like a leather or a vinyl. And so in those regards, doing a Restomod works out really well. And so these are some of my initial thoughts on doing a restoration project on an e-body Mopar. And like I said a couple of times in this video, it has never been a better time as far as aftermarket support and reproduction parts. But at the same time, it's definitely not the cheapest time to be doing it, just because the price of these cars, it's getting so high, especially if you're looking for the ultimate desirable model, the 71 Barracuda or 71 Cuda model. And it's just one of those things you have to deal with in this hobby. And Mopars in general are not the cheapest restoration project to undertake. E-bodies are probably the most expensive restoration project to undertake. But if it's something you're passionate about and something you definitely want to do, I highly encourage you to do so, because they are such amazing cars. And I'm on my 6th restoration project myself, and I just have immense passion for these cars. So I hope you found this information useful as always. If you did, go ahead and smash that like button, give me that thumbs up. It helps me out tremendously with that YouTube algorithm. And if you want to be kept up to date with all my future uploads, don't forget to smash that subscribe button down below and ring that notification bell as well. And that way YouTube will keep you up to date of all the videos I do in the future. And of course, as I've been doing, I've included links in the description below for the vlogging equipment that I use, as well as the detailing products that I use. And so if you click on those links, it helps me out and the channel out. I will also include in the description below links to some of the top companies that are producing parts for these cars. And so it'll help if you're missing some parts. Some of these companies might have something that you're looking for. So there will be a number of links in the description below for that. And as always, guys, I will see you the next video.